Just yeah, yeah. Yeah, just different generations of tire changers. You're gonna 3, 2, 1 action. You're gonna snap. You're gonna whistle. Or all right, there you go. Okay. You know, in cars, you have to come out with the 2024 Toyota, the 2025 Toyota, and the only difference is they put a 25 on the car instead of a 24. Okay, so we're actually finally getting away from that. Like we used to like so. Very early tire changers was like a TCX 505, and then after a couple of years, we had the TCX 515, and then we had the TCX 535, and now we have the TCX 51. Right? It's sort of like our competition does a really good job of hounding us because they can't make anything that's as good as we make, but they're really good at being that annoying like 6-year-old cousin at the dinner party that you really just don't want to be around anymore. They're just really good at annoying us, and they find little things and they poke at us, right? Well, why do you want to buy theirs? They've had that for 4 years now. Why don't you buy our, And theirs is the same thing. They just put a new sticker on the front of it, right? We put a 15 on the box, right? So, however, every once in a while, we truly realize that
improvements are necessary.
So, car guys, what's the number one rule when a new car comes out?
Don't buy the first one.
That's right. Now,
yeah, I mean,
don't buy the first one. That's all.
The problem is you no longer can say that, right? Because if you never buy the first year model of something, the Hunter sales is going to go, all right? It's going to sound like when I bend over. So you have to be really careful about that now. So you want people to buy. Hey, evidently I'm like a crane. I have a limiting sensor, and it lets me know when I've bent over too far. So you have to start telling people to willingly buy the first year of a new product line, right? So the Ultimate ADAS from 2023 to 2025, we've updated the gimbals, 2 or 3 times. We actually updated the rail board once, right? There's certain things that, the good thing is we're like Tony Stark. We learn from our mistakes. It may take us a little bit longer to learn from them sometimes than others. So many, many years ago, in the 505 stages, don't you just love the grease in there, by the way, yeah. Because it came in contact with water? It's just nasty, disgusting, primordial ooze. It's just gross. Oh, yeah. So everyone always wants to wipe it out, and I'm like, you cannot wipe it out because the next 3 classes have to be able to see what it looks like. So this is what happens when water and grease get together. They have a really, it's just nasty, and usually it smells nasty too. So a long time ago, when we very first made this, we were like, gee, we need to make a cylinder. So we looked at how most normal people make a cylinder, and you take a flat plate and you put it in a 100-ton brake press and and then it makes a nice cylinder. And then we learned that making actual round cylinders is hard, because what happens is the steel, as it's extruding, there's thick pieces and thin pieces. And it's the thin pieces that give us the trouble, because the seal can't seal up, because while it is circular, it's not all the same thickness. So that's why we came up with the John Deere cornhead grease, because the cornhead grease fills in those little low imperfections without getting wiped away. That's why it's really thin and really not really watery, but a very thin compared to most regular greases. Okay, so we did this for a few years. And like, again, we couldn't never get this to quite seal right. Okay, so then we decided, well, rather than doing that, we'll just machine one. And believe it or not, even machining it, we get it better, but it's still not perfect. It's still not a true perfect circle, which is why we even in this one here, you're still going to use John Deere cornhead grease just to fill in the little imperfections. Okay, this one here. This front, I don't actually have a super old front plate, but the older front plates were only half as thick and half as thick. So for you guys in the tire changing business, you know, if you have something that's on a piece of steel and it's real thin, it turns into a knife and it'll actually cut a groove into stuff. So we were actually grooving the pins that hold these in. Um, the other thing we did, it's going to be a little hard for you to do, maybe when in a second. When you look at the actual side shovel arms, where the bead breaker cylinder goes out, and then there's the threaded part, and then there's a pin. That pin is known as, what we call it, a swinging pin, because I guess it's not really locked in there. It just goes around the shaft and it just sits there and the thing swings in and out. So it's called a swinging pin. The swing on the arm itself used to be half as thick on the top and the bottom where the swinging pins went. But because that arm was half as thin, again, it acted like a knife, and it would actually cut halfway into the swinging pin before people realized that they had a lot of looseness and slack in it. And we were replacing a lot of arms. That's the swinging pin. Okay. So then when we replaced the arms, we added that extra bushing right there, which makes the arms twice as thick on the top and the bottom, because the more thickness you have, the more you can dissipate the forces. Okay. So this used to be really thin, this used to be really thin, and these parts here were either starting to bow or warp, and then again, this piece here was actually cutting through the bolts. The other thing that we did is we were like, well, we're just an engineering company. So this thing here sits like this.
Are there any more of those out there?
Probably. You'll probably run into them. People in Ohio are poor. I'm just kidding. I only said it because he's got me on. All right. So this goes in like this. Obviously, the rod is moving in and out through the middle. So we decided, hey, let's just put a bolt in the top and a bolt on the bottom. And the bolt had a round head and it had an inverted Allen. Well, after, you can see how there's a lip on here and it gets sharp. After this gets sharp, bolts only get acted on in the loosening, right? For whatever reason, bolts will never tighten themselves. They'll always just loosen themselves. So the bolt on the top, we didn't have to worry too much about, but the bolt on the bottom, every time this thing pivoted and the sharp edge caught it, it would take the bolt and turn it a little bit, and it would loosen, and it would loosen, and it would loosen until it got down to the last half a thread. And then the next time you went to break a tire down, that bolt just took out the last half a thread of the, inside the tire changer. And we came up with helicoil kits. You were having to drill it out bigger. Then we came up with that very special washer called a Nordlock washer. You guys may not have seen a Nordlock washer, but a Nordlock washer is actually two washers, and they're actually ramped in opposite directions, so that when the bolt would try to loosen up, the Nordlock would sort of raise up and would stop the bolt from unscrewing. And that helped out a lot, but it still allowed the bolt to unscrew. Now, being service technicians, no one ever looks on the ground. This bolt falls on the ground. No one notices it falls on the ground because they're too busy changing tires or watching TikTok videos. Then the one guy that does look on the ground, the guy that sweeps up at night. So the guy finds a bolt laying on the ground next to the tire changer, doesn't get paid to think maybe it goes with the tire changer, sweeps it up and throws it away. So now you only have one pivot point instead of two pivot points. At this point, when you pivot this here is going to get pulled out with the arm, because it hits the tire changer and it pulls out. Now all of a sudden, the nut that's threaded onto here, now all of a sudden I'm putting a lateral force on that rather than just in and out. Now I'm putting a twisting motion on it. So the cool part is this part snaps off. This part and the bolt shoot that way at like Mach 3. This tank then decides that it is now free also and tries to shoot this way at Mach 3. And depending on how many bolts are actually holding on the side cover, it will usually make it either a quarter or 3/4 of the way out of the tire changer before the exploding air finally dissipates, and someone's changing their underwear at that point, because it's a fairly loud noise. So if you notice, if you could hand me one of the new pins for this one. It's a black pin with like a bimetallic, and then let me have the bimetallic piece that went over it. So what we decided to do on these is now there's no threads. So this one goes in on the top. We have this little bimetallic spring here that goes over this, right? So if you put it, tell you what, you have gorgeous hands. Hold this. There you go. All right. So now I still can't go all the way through. So now this piece goes between the two. So I have pressure here and I have pressure here. This guy just goes over it, right? And then since it's captured, this can't come out. So it can't come out on the bottom because it's sitting like this on the bottom. And then as long as this spring guy is sitting in here, this guy can rotate and it doesn't matter. This guy can rotate and it doesn't matter because it's not threaded. Okay. Again, your worst enemy for this is the guy who uses the blue goo, because the guy using the blue goo, that stuff spreads all over the place, and since it's water-based, it hits this, rolls underneath it, and then takes this and decides that it's going to weld this piece to that piece because the blue goo is very oxidizing.
Yeah, Les Schwab's real big on slick instead of
Yeah, the blue goose, yeah, it's wonderful stuff. So at that point, you have to have one of those really nice Diablo blades for your Sawzall, and you're going to have to cut this in 2 places, right? Because you can't just cut it in one, because you still can't get the top off. So you're going to have to cut it in 2 places in order to get this out, because, and then you're just going to have to replace this whole piece. Okay, all right. Thank you for the hand modeling there. If you notice, again, we put our O-ring on the inside. So this O-ring is not under a lot of pressure because it sits down inside the cylinder. So it's just holding the air in. You don't really have to worry about these things blowing out because it can't see the outside. Right? So it's in there pretty good. Okay. The other thing I will talk about, and someone actually cleaned, well, this one's actually clean. This is untreated steel. Right? So you have grease on untreated steel, and then you introduce water into your grease on untreated steel, which means that untreated steel is going to rust like the Titanic. You're going to find wonderful yellows and oranges and beiges from the different, depending on how long that water has been in there and rusting the untreated steel. It usually pools right here on the bottom, and it is a nasty, smelly, disgusting mess. So you're going to want to clean all that up, put in a new slather of John Deere cornhead grease, take your newly cool way of putting in the side shovel cylinder there. Okay. This one, these here, if you have a real small mom and pop shop that has like a 12-year-old tire changer, they probably have this design here. If you have anything newer than 10 years, you're probably going to have one of these designs. These designs have been around for quite a while. It's a much better design. We still use it today, especially with the pins rather than the bolts. This one here, you can't switch over to the pins. This has to stay in the bolt section, so you're going to be replacing a lot of bolts, a lot of Nord lock washers and stuff like that. I'm actually surprised these are black still from the factory. When you order the repair kit, they're actually gray. But that's been a while. So, but these, yeah, the actual the actual ring.
Why'd they redesign these pins and then it's just
So, well, so it stays the same because this is just a double lip gasket, right? You can just peel off this double lip gasket, right? Because there's a thing in the middle. There's a groove in the middle that holds the double lip gasket, and you just put the double lip gasket back on. I haven't taken a new one apart in a really long time, but the replacement ones are gray. And what we did with the replacement ones is the black rubber is a little, the durometer or the toughness is a little too durometery. There's a technical term for you. So we lowered the durometer a little bit, but we also made the seal itself a little bit bigger, a little puffier. So when you try to put the gray one in, it's going to be a lot tighter than the black one that's coming out of it. Okay. And we do that just to try to reseal everything. Normally those side shovels, It depends on how your side shovel repair is going to depend on how big your temperature swing is. When you go from hot to cold or cold to hot is usually when these will fail. Okay. For me, it was always going hot to cold, which is weird because you would think it would be different because it gets smaller. But for some reason, when it went from hot to cold in like, I don't know, October or whatever, we would be rebuilding these. So what would happen is um, the side shovel would come in and it would touch the tire. And then once it touched the tire, this guy here, the seal would tilt a little bit. And when it would tilt a little bit, it would cause an internal air leak because it wouldn't seal up. So you'd hear a lot of air rushing, but you wouldn't feel the air. And then maybe the guy was smart enough, he would get the tire out of the way and he would run it in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out. And he'd slather that stuff around in there. And then it would work for another day or two, and then the thing would come up, touch the tire again, and just stop and just sit there like, I'm not doing anything, right? I don't care what you want me to do, I ain't doing it. So usually on that tube of John Deere cornhead grease, I could get 3-cylinder rebuilds out of 1 tube of John Deere cornhead grease. So just for you guys. Where? Oh, here it is. You can so you can order this in individual pieces, or you can order a kit. In all my years, I've never had one of these O-rings fail because, again, you can see the wiper ring right there. So the wiper ring does a real good job of keeping the O-ring clean. If you do order a kit, and an older kit this is, you'll get a new ring, you'll get a new gray, you will get all of the, you get the wiper ring, you'll get the big ring. I'm probably missing a piece or two. Yeah, I'm missing a piece or two. So this kit's like 80 bucks. I never bothered to do that. I always just kept these two pieces on the truck because that's all you needed. Nowadays, you don't even probably even need this anymore. You just need this because you're not going to replace that O-ring. Those O-rings don't leak, and you're just going to have to keep replacing the, you know.
Is there certain machines that I remember like first or second you were talking about, like a machine that they're no longer making parts for like 10 years or?
No, we still make well, so what we tell people is that we have 10 years worth of parts on hand, but that 10 years sometimes, most of the time, turns into 15 or 20. But what we say is 10 years at a minimum. And usually that's to do with either electronic circuit boards or computers or something like that, because electronic and computers, they age like 1 year is like 100 years to a PC. So trying to keep PC parts around for 10 years is actually quite a feat. The TCX 505, which you can't even find under current tire changers, you have to go into legacy tire changers. The TCX 505, you can probably order in almost every part you want for TCX 505. And some of those I put in almost 20 years ago now, 2008, 2010, would be 16 years. We do a really good job of keeping stuff around. The other good thing is this, we started to use the new fittings here that, you know, turn, right? This is a nice 90, it's a fitting, but it rotates. If you notice on the old one, it's a solid, right? So if you ever had to take that out, you had to make sure that you clocked it right so that it ended up in the right spot. The newer stuff, it doesn't matter because it's all rotating stuff. Side shovels, it's just a cylinder. It's just double-sided air pressure. We just need to make sure it doesn't leak out the front and doesn't leak in the middle. And again, I'm going to keep preaching this, but the John Deere cornhead grease just does a really good job of sealing everything up. Okay. It's simple. It's just air. It's not. Thankfully, we didn't make it complicated. Okay. As far as that goes, when you're putting it back together again, try not to kink the hoses like the last few classes have. Evidently, the last the last few classes are cannibals, or I don't know what, they're just, they're on the lower end of the gene pool or something. So let's try to make it look like we know what we're doing. Okay. I guess just put it back together. There is, so for you guys, if you take the nut off, there is an O-ring in the middle here because we have to seal this off to the shaft, right? So there is an O-ring that goes around the actual piston portion of it, but you should never have to take the nut off or take the piston off because all you're doing is replacing the lip seal. Okay, so. And again, every time I get to do that, it is just the coolest thing in the world. So, oh, it does, doesn't it? It is a satisfying sound.
Won't you?